Hello everyone. Today we are going to perform another packet tracer activity. So this activity is to static routing and the rerouting. So we have this topology, and originally it was in the Spanish, so I just translate into the English. So we will follow this document. And if we go to the steps, so first step is to configure the IP addresses, subnet mask and the default gateway on the computers. So if I go back to the topology, so this one is our computers network, and on the PC1 we have to follow the 172.17.0.0/16 network, and the PC1 IP is number 2 and PC2 IP is number 3, and the default gateway is the number 1. This IP that is configured on this interface of the router R1. Okay, let me configure the settings so we can see the interface names on the routers. So go to the options, preference, and click on the show labels. Okay, so we have the default gateway GI0/2 for this network PC1 and PC2. Okay, if we start with configuration, now we have 6% already complete, and let's start. Just click on the PC1 and configure the first IP, desktop IP configuration, and the IP will be 172.17.0.2 and it's 16, so 255.255.0.0, and the default gateway is number 1, so 172.17.0.1. Okay, now go to the PC number 2. The IP is number 3, so go to the desktop IP configuration, and the IP is 172.17.0.3, and subnet mask is 16, so 255.255.0.0, and the default gateway is 0.1. Okay, the next one is PC3, and PC3 is a part of network 20, and the IP is number 2 and the gateway is number 1. So go to the PC3 desktop IP configuration, 172.20.0.2 and 255.255.0.0, and the default gateway will be 20.0.1. Okay, now on the PC number 4, the IP address is number 3 of the 20 network, desktop IP configuration, and it's 172.20.0.3, subnet is 2/16, and 172.20.0.1 is the default gateway. Okay, now go to the PC number 5, is the LAN network of router 2. Okay, now it's a 21 network, so desktop IP configuration, 172.21.0.2, 255.255.0.0, and the gateway is 1, so 172.21.0.1. Okay, the next one is PC6, the IP is number 3, 172.21.0.3 and /16.1 is the gateway. Okay, now we are on the LAN side of the router R3, and it's on the PC7, and PC7 is the part of network 22, so go to the desktop IP configuration, and 172.22.0.2/16, and the gateway is 1. Okay, now PC number 8, IP is 3 of the network 22, 172.22.0.3, subnet mask, and the gateway is 1. Okay, now we are on the PC9. PC9 172.23.0.3 and the /16, and the 1 is the gateway. Okay, now PC number 10. So this IP is number 2, 172.23.0.2, subnet mask and the default gateway. Okay, so we just configured the static IPs on the all 10 computers. Our next step is to configure the IP addresses on the interfaces of the routers. So I will go with the router R1, and this R1. Okay, so the interface GI0/2 is the part of network 17 and the IP will be 17.0.1. So I will go to the interface. First, we are going to rename the router, so the command will be hostname in the configuration mode R1 and then interface GI0/2. So we will issue the command no shutdown to enable the interface, and we see this notification that interface is up. Now we will configure the IP address. The IP address will be 172.17.0.1 and the subnet mask is 16. So it will be 255.255.0.0, means that 16 bits are on for this network. Okay, now the next interface is 01, and this 01 interface is part of network 20, and we will configure the IP 172.20.0.1 on this interface. So on the router R1 interface GI0/1. So first we will issue the command no shutdown to enable the interface, and the IP address will be 172.20.0.1 and the subnet mask is 16, so 255.255.0.0. Okay, the next one we have to configure the interface that is between router R1 and the router R2, and on the router R1 GI0/0, the IP address will be number 1 because number 2 is configured on this side. So we will configure 1 on this side and it's /30. So we will use the different subnet mask this time. So just go to the interface GI0/0, no shut command. Okay, no shut command, and the IP address 172.19.0.1 and subnet mask 255.255.255.252. We configure a 1.9 network, so it's /30. So the /30, the subnet mask is this one. So using the /30, we only can configure 2 usable IP addresses. So first IP address is configured on R1, the second will be configured on R2. Okay, so we just configure the IP address. Now the last interface on this router is the serial 0/0/0. So interface serial 0/0/0. This interface that connect a router R1 and router R3, and the IP address is 18 network, the number 1. Okay, so this one IP address 172.18.0.1 and the subnet mask is 30, so 255.255.255.252. Okay, I just saved the configuration. Now we will move on the router R2. So on the router R2 we have to configure 2 interfaces, the GI0/0 that is connected with the router R1 and the GI0/2 that is for the LAN network. So we will go into the router R2, go to the CLI. First thing, we will rename this router, configure terminal, and the command will be hostname R2 and the interface GI0/0, no shut to enable the interface, and the IP address will be 172.19.0.2, and the subnet mask is 255, 255, 255 and 252 because we are using /30 network. Okay, the next interface is 02, so interface GI0/2, and we will issue the no shutdown command. Now the IP address is 172.21.0.1 and is 16. We are here, so the 16 network 255.255.0.0. Okay, we will save the configuration using the command WR. It's the short version of write to memory, or we can use the command copy running configuration. So running configuration from the RAM to the startup configuration to the ROM. So just hit the enter. The configuration are saved. Now the last router is the router R3. So on the R3 we have to configure three interfaces: the interface to the R1 and the switch C4 and the switch C5. Okay, so click on this, go to the CLI. First thing, we will rename this router. So go to the configuration mode, type the command hostname R3 and R3, then we will go to the interface that is 0/0/0/0 to the router R1. So interface 0/0/0/0, no shut to enable the interface. Okay, so we don't see any green light, looks like this interface is down. Okay, so if we come to the command show IP interface brief, yeah, so our this interface is down. We just configure the IP address and we did not issue the command no shutdown, so it's showing as administrative down. So configure terminal. We are back on the router R1, so go to the interface 0/0/0/0 and issue the command no shut. Okay, now we see the green lights, and I just saved the configuration on R1. Okay, our interface is up. We can test by the ping. So number 2 IP is configured on this side, the other side IP is number 1, so do ping 172.18.0.1. Okay, there must be a ping response. No, because we did not configure IP address yet. So let's configure the IP address on this interface. So it's 172.18.0.2 and 255.255.255.252. It is /30 network. Hit the enter. Now shoot the ping command again. Okay, we get the response now. Okay, we just configured the connection between the router R1 and the router R3. Now just move to the LAN network for the C4, and the C4 is connected with the interface GI0/2, and the IP address will be 1 for the default gateway. So go to the interface GI0/2, no shut to enable the interface, and the IP address is 172.22.0.1 and the /16 network, so the subnet will be 255.255.0.0. Okay, the next interface is this LAN network of the C5 switch, and this one is connected with the interface GI0/1. So we will go to the interface GI0/1, no shut command, and this time the IP address will be 172.23.0.1 and the gateway is /16, so 255.255.0.0. Okay, I just save the configuration. The next thing, so we just configure the IP addresses on the computers and configure the name of the routers R1, R2 and ISP. So this ISP is pending. We are on the ISP router now. Go to the CLI, enable, go to the configuration mode and set the name. So the host name will be the ISP and the interface is serial 0/0/0, no shut, and the IP address will be we have IP address 1 on this side, so we will configure number 2 on this side, so 209.165.100.2 and /30, so subnet mask will be 252. Okay, just save the configuration. Now we have to configure the interface on this router R3, and this R3 is connected with the ISP using the interface serial 0/0/1. So configure terminal interface serial 0/0/1 and no shut. The IP address will be 209.165.100.1 and the subnet mask is 252. 255.255.252. Here we go. Okay, we save the configuration on R3. The next thing we configure interfaces, names. Okay, so we just covered the 2 points. Now configure the serial links, and where we have to put the clock rate 125000 on the DCE side. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so we have two serial interfaces, the between R1 and R3 and between R3 to the ISP. And when we see, so this side we will see the small clock, so we have to configure the clock rate on this interface. And if we go to the R3 and we see the clock on the serial 0/0/1 to the router ISP, so we will configure the clock rate on this interface. So first of all, go to the router R1. So configure terminal interface serial 0/0/0, and to configure the clock rate, command will be clock space rate. And if we type the question mark, so we will the different clock rates, and in the requirements we have to configure 125.000, this one. Okay, so 125.000 and hit the enter. Now we have to configure on another serial link between router R3 and the ISP, and this time it's serial 0/0/1. So go to the configure mode, interface serial 0/0/1, and clock rate will be 125 to 125.000. Okay, next thing, create the loopback interface to the ISP and give it the IP address indicated by the topology. So in the topology, the IP address is 74.75.76.77/32. So click on the ISP. We have to configure the loopback interface loopback 0. Okay, so we are in the configuration mode. So the command will be interface loopback, and the number of the loopback, it's number 0. Okay, so we don't need to issue the no shut command because it's the virtual interface, and by default virtual interface is up. So we can issue the command, but it's not required. The IP address will be 74.75.76.77 and is 32, so it will be all 255. So 255, 255, 255, 255. So this IP with the /32 subnet mask. We will hit the enter. Okay, now save the configuration. The next thing, static routing. So we have to create the default route on router R1, R2 and R3, and we have to specify the IP address of the next hop. So let's do that. Okay, if we go to the R2, so R2 will send the all traffic to the R1 because this one is the only path that R2 can send the traffic out the network. And if we talk about the R1, so R1 can only send the traffic to the R3 to go to the ISP. R1 can send the traffic R2, but there is no ISP. So R1 will be go to the ISP via R3. And of course, R3 can send direct traffic to the ISP using this IP address 209.165.100.2. The IP address is configured on the ISP side. So 1 is on this side and 2 is on this side. So this R3 will be send traffic on next hop IP address of number 2. Okay, we will configure the static route first on the R2. So for the R2, the next hop IP address will be 172.19.0.1 because 2 is configured on this side and 1 is configured on this side on interface GI0/0. I can show the IP address of show IP interface brief. So GI0/0 is the interface that is connected with the router R2. Okay, and on this interface, the IP address is configured 172.19.0.1. So this R2 will be send the traffic to this IP, the next hop IP address, and we must be able to ping this IP from the router R2. Let's try this. We are in the R2 now. Try to ping 172.19.0.1. Okay, so we can ping this IP. Now we will configure the default static route. So to configure the default static route, we will go into the configuration mode and the command will be IP space route. For the default, we have to use 0.0.0 and 0. The mask will be 0.0.0 and the next hop IP address is 172.19.0.1. Okay. The next thing, we have to configure another static route from R2 to R1. We just configured that. Now we will go to from R1 to the R3. And for this purpose, we will send R traffic to 172.18.0.2. The 2 IP address is the next hop IP address that is configured on the R3. So go to the R1 configuration mode. We must be able to ping this IP 172.18.0.2. Okay, now we will configure the static route, static default route. So IP route space network will be all 0 and the subnet will be all 0 for the default route. And the next hop IP address is 172.18.0.2. Okay, we just configured that. On the R3, we have to route our traffic to the ISP, and the IP on the ISP side is number 2. So this one is the network 209.165.100.0/30, and the IP first IP.1 is configured on this side and 2 is configured on this side. So we will use the next hop IP address. Let's try to ping next hop IP address 209.165.00.2. Okay, we can configure this. Now move to the default static route. So we will go into the configuration mode, IP space route space network will be 0.0.0 and the subnet mask will be 0 and 209.165.100.2. The IP address of the ISP interface 00/0/0. Okay, we just configure the static routes and we see the this topology is complete with 100%. We just covered all points. We will go move. So static routing is configured. Now the next thing is we have to configure the dynamic routing. So with the dynamic routing, these are some questions. We will just configure the dynamic OSPF version 2, RIP version 2 on the all routers. So after configuration of the RIP, we will test the communication between the computers. So the last thing is to configure the RIP. So we will go with the router R1. Okay, if we talk about the router R1, we have 4 networks. The first network is on the C1, second is on the C2, and the network between R1 and the R2 is the third network, and the fourth network is between R1 and the R3. So in the routing, we have to advertise these all four networks. So I will go into the router R1. We are already in the configuration mode. So to configure the RIP routing, the command will be router space RIP, and we have to configure version 2 so we can support the subnetting. And I'm going to configure no auto summary. Okay, the first network, the command will be network, and the name of the network is 172.17.0.0. This network that is configured behind the switch C1 for the PC1 and the PC2. This 17 network, hit the enter. The next network is C2, that is behind for the PC3 and the PC4, and this network is 172.20. So network command 172.20.0.0. The third network is between the router R1, the R3, and this is 19 network. So network 172.19.0.0. The last network on the R1 is the number 18, that is between router R1 and the R3. So network 172.18.0.0. Okay, we just configured the routing RIP on the router R1. The next one is the R2. So on the R2 we have to configure two networks. The network behind the R2 LAN, that is .21, and the network between R2 and the R1, this 19 network. So go to the router R2. We are already in the configuration mode. So the command will be router RIP version 2, no auto summary, and the network is 172.19.0.0. The other network is 172.21.0.0. Okay, we just configured two networks, 19 and the 21. Now go to the last net router of the R3. Okay, so it's the second last net router. We also configured the RIP on the ISP as well. So configuration mode and router RIP version 2, and no auto summary to disable the summary. And on the R3 we have to configure, we have to advertise four networks: the ISP network, the network to the router R1, and the two LAN networks for the switch C4 and the C5. So first network is between router R1 and R3, so it's network 172.18, this network .0.0, and the ISP network is 209.165.100.0, and the other two networks, that is for the LAN part, and it's number 22 and 23. So network 172.22.0.0 and network 172.23.0.0. Okay, here we go. We save the configuration. The last thing, just configure the RIP on the ISP. Okay, on the ISP router, we have to advertise two networks. The first network is between the router R3 and the ISP, and another network is the loopback interface IP. So we will also advertise the loopback in the ISP. So we are in the configuration mode and go to the router RIP version 2 and no auto summary. The network is 209.165.100.0, and the last network is the loopback, so 74.75.76.77. hit the enter. Okay, so with this command our configuration for the RIP routing is complete. Now let's try to check the RIP. So if I go to the router R1 and on the R1 I issue the command show IP route. So on the routing table I can see this R means that rip routing, and if we check the code of this R, so it's for the rip routing. So this rip is enabled on this router, and we are learning the router using the rip routing. And we just check the network 174.75.76.77/30. This IP is configured on ISP loopback interface, and we just get the routing update of this IP, and we must be able to ping the IP address of this. So 74.75.76.77, and we are getting the response. So it means that our routing is working. We can try to ping the same IP address of 74.75 from any PC. Let's try with the PC2. Go to the command prompt and ping space 74.75.76.77, and we are getting response. It means that our PC2 is going to using the C1, R1, R3 to the ISP. So this PC is following this path to go to the ISP. So this one is a simple topology, and using the static routing and the rip routing. Thank you for watching.